Hello and welcome to the CIH podcast. I am Chloe Fletcher, Head of Policy and External Affairs here at CIH. And as this week is Learning at Work Week, we're discussing what it means to be a housing professional in the current landscape and how CIH can help support learning with our professional standards, qualification and training products. Continuous professional development has never been more important in the sector, with the competence and conduct requirements coming into force this October in England. So we're going to be discussing what that might look like for housing professionals. And to help me with this discussion, I am joined by a fantastic lineup of speakers today. We have Lindsay Driscoll, who is Vice Chair of CIH's Professional Standards Committee. I have Connor Clark, who is a member of CIH's Professional Standards Committee, and Sarah Dunkerley, CIH's Director of Membership and Professional Development. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks.
So we're going to kick off with this focus on CPD, and it's a really great moment this week, Learning at Work Week, to reflect on the importance of CPD throughout all of our careers. Sarah, can I ask you how you describe the current state of professional development in the housing sector and why it's so important at the moment?
Yes, thank you, Chloe. Really nice to be here today. So, yeah, I think in terms of the housing sector at the moment, CPD is probably approached in a variety of different ways, and there's sort of patch is not the word, but a sort of different approaches from different people and interpretations perhaps in different ways as well. So, I think it's one of the things to talk about today is really about what is CPD, how do we approach it, how do we recognise it, and all of those things. That's a really important part of it. I think sometimes it's seen as a very, very formal thing. So if you do a qualification or training or something similar to that, then people definitely would see that as CPD. I think there's also really lots of other opportunities for people to engage with CPD and probably do it on a sort of almost on an ongoing basis throughout their daily work without really realising necessarily that it's CPD. Yeah. So I think that sort of that sort of discussion and understanding across individuals and organisations is really an area for development.
Yeah, and I think just from my perspective, obviously as head of the policy team here in England, obviously we do member briefings, we run events and webinars, and actually all of that can count as continuous professional development, can't it, Sarah?
Absolutely. And, people will be doing things in their normal day-to-day work in terms of, things like updating policies and having to look at changes to legislation, sharing practice across different teams in organisations and all of those sort of things, using new technology to do things, all of those things are part of maintaining currency of knowledge and skills and working practices and also developing things further into the future.
Yeah. Lindsay, do you have any other examples of the sorts of things that we might not think naturally of as CPD?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so as Sarah's touched on there, there's a lot of focus. There's always been a lot of focus on kind of the qualification elements of CPD and the knowledge element, the technical knowledge elements of CPD. But we learn every single day. Everything that we do, every person that we speak to, we will learn something from them. So I think what is key is that is for people to recognise when they are undertaking CPD through learning about a new part of the organisation, learning about a new part of a partnership agency or a voluntary area that we're working with in the sector that can bring something to our organisation, to ourselves, but also to our tenants or residents as well. And I think what we really need is some consistency around consciously logging and consciously reflecting on the development that we do on a day-to-day basis in terms of things like our experiences, our emotional intelligence, our ethical practice as well, because it's that conscious logging that lets us look back and see how much we've developed over the course of a year or 6 months or however long you sort of look at your CPD. And it gives you that much more holistic view of the amount of continuous improvement that is actually happening in individuals, in organisations across the board, not just, as we've said, through those technical qualifications, those academic elements, but through the day-to-day things that we do within our organisations and with our residents.
Yeah, absolutely. And Connor, and I think what Lindsay was saying about reflection is really important. How difficult is it to do that, and how would you try to make some time for that in your working week?
Oh, it's one of the most important things is to try and carve out time for reflection. And you've got to see it as a priority and not almost a choice. The
Thanks.
housing sector has always had a strong CPD background. I started my own journey in housing as an apprentice, completing my CIH Level 2 qualification, and I still see myself learning every single day. What's changed is the context we're operating in. It's much more a volatile environment and uncertain globally and locally. And for me, that means that CPD isn't optional, it's an essential tool.
Absolutely. There is so much change at the moment to keep on top of. And this is obviously a really clear and structured way to try to encourage you to do that, and to make sure you make the time, as you've all said, to actually reflect on that and mark it down and count it towards the professional development that we all want to see in the sector. So in England, we've got the new competence and conduct requirements coming in from October, and the regulator of social housing will be going into organisations across the country to check that everyone is taking that seriously, and people have plans in place to support their employees being competent people with the skills and behaviour that we would expect in the sector. What does that mean in practical terms for housing professionals and the organisations that they work for? And how prepared, in your experience, do you think the sector is at the moment, Lindsay?
I think it's mixed. I think, there's some very proactive areas, some very proactive organisations. And I think it goes on both ends of the scale, really. The smaller organisations are able to easily kind of embed these new requirements into their training programs, and larger organisations are putting a lot of thought and a lot of resources into that. So we have got some very proactive areas. We've also got some organisations who have been, I think, waiting for more guidance, more kind of direction from the government about what it's going to look like in practice. And of course, we've got that the period of time where we can kind of embed it in as well once it comes into force in later this year. So we're getting there, I think. As a tutor who works for a number of different organisations, there's definitely been an increase in interest for things like the level 4 and 5 CIH qualifications, the certificates in housing practice or certificates in housing, also at level 3 as well, which doesn't form part of the conduct and competence standard, the competence and conduct standard, but it is, it's people getting prepared for being ready to move on to those qualifications, which is really, really pleasing to see, and I'm sure Sarah will be able to confirm that as well. What I've seen is that organisations are starting to map existing competence against the requirements that are coming in. They are looking to plan for learning, which is fantastic, but the guidance and the support that's available has been somewhat patchy, really, and a bit mixed. And I think there's still a little bit of uncertainty about what it's going to look like moving forward for some organisations, and what's really required and what is going to be required. I think key things for organisations to do really is about mapping those role profiles, making sure that there's a culture of learning and development within the organisation, that it's a positive thing, and that things like learning and development are embedded from the start of someone's career. It was really pleasing to hear Connor say that he came in at level 2, starting his career in housing on a level 2 apprenticeship, which I think is a fantastic thing to do, because it starts you in the sector in a career with learning and development as the real focus of part of the role. It's part of what we do. It changes all the time, and it's something that's so important. So we need to keep it going. We need to keep this positive culture, this positive outlook on selling the benefits of taking time to learn, taking time to reflect, to log CPD, which is a big thing that a lot of people are not necessarily doing, and it's so important not just for the organisations, but to make sure that individuals are ready for this change, this learning and development shift as well. Everyone that works in housing, it should be a key priority.
Yeah, and as you say, Lindsay, it's really about that shift in culture to a learning environment, isn't it? And Sarah, I'm sure you, in the same way as I have had lots of questions about that guidance that the government's published, and whether we can help them kind of interpret it or do different things. But it really is up to the organisations themselves to reflect and look, isn't it? And I just wondered what your advice would be to everyone out there scratching their heads at the moment.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think there is a massive focus on the mandatory qualification element, and absolutely there will be, and that will be the priority for a lot of organisations and individuals to start with. But I can't emphasise enough the importance around that cultural point that Lindsay's made, because as well as the requirement for those qualifications, there's also the requirement for a workforce development plan for an organisation to have, and a code of conduct as well for individuals to follow. So about having the right knowledge and skills in the organisation, and behaviours as well. So that whole sort of rounded aspect to it. So I think we need to be thinking about it in the round, and absolutely thinking about everybody within the organisation continuing with their professional development throughout their careers from the start. So
Thanks. And Connor, in Wales, obviously you haven't got the same requirements coming in, but one would hope, as across the whole of the UK, we would hope that housing organisations are still looking to take the learning and development really seriously of their staff in order to ultimately help those outcomes to tenants. What do you see happening across Wales?
Like you said, Chloe, it's not a formal requirement in Wales because housing's a devolved area, but the themes and expectations are still highly relevant. As an expectation from a regulation point of view that colleagues are in roles and they're competent. But we watch them with keen eyes over the border. We're always learning from each other from across the UK.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Sarah, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just to really add to all of that. I mean, we at CIH, we have obviously a range of opportunities and options for our members and people who are not yet members but are on their way to being members, to undertake CPD activities. We have that range across qualifications and training, across the sort of policy resources, Chloe, that you've already mentioned, our knowledge hub and all of those aspects. So we're never going to be prescriptive in terms of what people should do. Members do come to us and say, this is me, this is where I'm at in my career, what do I need to do, particularly in relation to CMC? We're not going to be doing that, but we are providing that whole range of different options for people to look at and decide where they might have their gaps and to fill those in lots of different ways.
Yeah, and really, I mean, I suppose going back to kind of you starting off as an apprentice, and I'm just reflecting that I started off as a trainee housing officer back in the day in housing management, and really wanted that career progression and wanted that support and learning and a commitment to learning, and that's why I was attracted to the sector. And I would hope, I mean, we've certainly got it in much of the sector already, but I would hope that actually some of the requirements around competence and conduct in England, and then spreading, you looking over the border and looking at good practice, actually really helps boost that, because I do think it will attract others to the housing sector work. Lindsay?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention as well. I mean, I know we're talking about CPD wider than the qualification side of things, but I also tutor for the CIH Housing Academy, and I just wanted to put out there, in case it's not widely known, that actually the qualifications that are offered through the CIH Housing Academy, and I'm sure other organisations as well, certainly from my experience, is that they are relevant across the devolved nations. They're not just relevant to England. Our resources are there for all of the devolved nations. I've had a learner from St Helena, and I have constantly have learners from England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and they can all relate to the content. They can all relate to the the resources that we've got, and are very, very successful in being able to write those qualifications, those assignments for the qualifications, because we don't just tailor our qualifications to England based. We are, all of the resources are based across the devolved nations and further to overseas territories as well. So yeah, if people are not aware of that, then those qualifications are highly relevant for anyone working in the housing sector, especially in social housing.
And I think that's because we generally at CIH, it's about those professional standards and the ethical standards and the behaviour. It's not a tick box exercise that meets just one set of requirements. It's about how you manage yourself and how you conduct yourself as a housing professional, which are, values that can be shared across many, many different areas. Connor, I just wanted to ask kind of, obviously in the professional standards that we have got that I've just referred to, they sit at the heart of what we do at CIH and how we define what good looks like. How do you sort of see members using those as a foundation, rather than just the checklist, and sort of taking it forward in a real way in their day-to-day work?
Even though regulation works slightly different in Wales, the principle's the same. The professional standards help define what good looks like across the housing sector. They align with the direction of travel around competence, professionalism, ethics, accountability, and resident focus. But the key is, like you said, Chloe, when they used properly, the standards support continuous professional growth, not just a tick box compliance activity. And learning really has to move from something that's occasional to something that's operational, something that's living and breathing, and is part of how we work day to day.
So I suppose actually thinking about it within an organisational context, it might be something that's useful to bring to one-to-ones with your manager, build into the performance framework of an organisation. Sarah, do you have kind of experience of that being done?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I know that there are organisations that use the professional standards as a basis for developing their own values and behaviours frameworks, use them as a basis and form a fundamental part of sort of the career development plans that they have for staff in place at the moment. They use them to underpin job descriptions and person specifications during recruitment processes, which then sets that scene and sets that framework, if you like, for people to then do exactly what you said, Chloe, which is to then use them as a basis for conversations, performance management conversations, career development conversations within the organisation. The other thing I would say about the professional standards is definitely is a focus, obviously, on an individual's behaviours and values in there, but there's also a focus on actually identifying and recognising good performance and behaviours in others, or poor performance and behaviours in others. So used in the holistic way in an organisation, as I've just described, can really help to contribute to that, any kind of culture shift that an organisation looking for.
Thanks, Sarah. And Lindsay, in your role as a sort of tutor, and you've obviously got lots of eager learners coming through, how do you use those professional standards as that foundation to help them for the rest of their career, and hopefully give them those tools to use in the next few decades?
I mean, exactly that, Chloe, as a foundation for their learning, for moving forward. It's always the very first thing that I bring into my teaching with learners. It's definitely embedded into the resources for people who are taking online learning as well. They are a good foundation to help us to reflect, a good starting point for identifying gaps in learning, for identifying areas of knowledge that you might need to build on, and to be able to use that then as a plan for development. Now, when you undertake the self-assessment questions, you will get a outcome at the end of it, and it'll tell you kind of where you sit on the 7 points of the 7 competencies of the professional standards. It will give you kind of a grading, almost like an outcome star, if anyone's seen that, a radar graph, I think it's called, and it'll point you kind of out, like, how well you've done in those questions for each one of the 7 elements, and it will also give you some guidance on there about how you can then seek out CPD opportunities or develop yourself in those areas that you might need development in. So they're a fantastic tool, and they can be used by both members and non-members. Obviously, they're a bit more involved and there's more questions for people who are members of CIH. But if you're a non-member and if you're interested in becoming a member, this is something that you can undertake as well, just to kind of see what membership might give you to be able to develop your knowledge, your skills, your behaviours, your areas of competence. I think it's important to note that both the professional standards and the competence of conduct requirements have got their groundings in the same sort of ethos and the same sort of background, that professionalisation of the sector. So where the professional standards have come along as a grounding, a foundation, if you like, for these professional behaviours, the C&C requirements have built on that to kind of give us this framework. So it's a really good entry into what is required for the C&C requirements as well. And both of them working together hand in hand are there to provide that consistency, the expectations that we should have across the sector. And because they're public as well, tenants know what to expect from us now, more so than they ever have done. And I think that can only be a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify for listeners, if they were interested in doing that self-assessment, Sarah, it's available on the CIH website?
It is, yeah, absolutely. On the professional standards page.
I was going to say, if you just Google CIH professional standards, it'll take you right to the page that you need to go on, give you all the information about the professional standards, about the Professional Standards Committee, and where they came from. It also gives you on that page the CPD framework, the CPD model that CIH have put in place as well to help with that side of things. And the self-assessment, as Sarah said, is available on there to take.
So for a housing professional kind of listening to us right now in the middle of Learning at Work week, and thinking there's so much going on, the legal kind of requirements are changing all the time, the policies being updated kind of almost daily. How do I keep up with all of this, and how can I actually start to meaningfully engage in continuous professional development? Are there some tools that we've got at the CIH, Sarah, that can help them?
Yeah, so what Lindsay's just mentioned in terms of the professional standards part of our website has a number of different elements and things that you can use for that. I mean, what I would always urge people to not think about CPD as another job to do. It's part of your sort of day-to-day work. There are elements of it around planning and planning specific things in. So if you wanted to learn something in detail and do a particular training course, then just thinking about that. If you wanted to come to a CIH event and get a sort of lay of the land and where things are at the moment, and again, there's some planning involved in all of that. But the other aspects to it around doing research for if you've got to write a report or to update a policy or all of those sort of things on your day-to-day work, or you're having a conversation with somebody and you think, oh, I need to understand a bit more about that. There's lots of resources through CIH that you can access. There's lots of resources elsewhere as well that you can access, and it's having that combination. But rather than thinking about it as a formal thing, oh, today I'm doing CPD, I think it's really thinking about maybe at the end of every couple of days, at the end of a week or something, is thinking about, okay, what have I done this week that has meant that I've learned something new? That might be a very big specific thing, or it might be a much smaller thing, but that reflection that Connor mentioned right at the outset is really, really important. And doing that and sort of building it into your working practice as a couple of minutes each week is a good way to think about it, I think, rather than thinking, today I'm going to come in and I'm going to do CPD.
Yes, and maybe rather than being overwhelmed with all of the change that we are seeing and will be seeing over the next few months as the results of the local and national elections kind of flow through to new policies and practices, it's actually looking at that as an opportunity, because you will be needing to learn new things. You will be doing that naturally as part of your job. You might be visiting the website for member briefings on what the new Welsh government is laying out in terms of social housing. You may have just listened to the King's speech last week in England and Wales, and wanting to know a bit more about the various bills that are coming through, and need some help. And as you say, Sarah, getting that from various different resources across the sector and the membership organisations all counts, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So, what is the one thing you would each say? And this is quite a hard question, given that we've all been talking about so many things to think about. But what would you want every housing professional and employer to focus on when it comes to learning and development from this week onwards? Almost using this as a bit of maybe a reset if you haven't been thinking about it for a while. I'll just come to you, Lindsay, to start with.
I think there's a couple of things I would recommend. As both Sarah and Connor and yourself, Chloe, have touched on, self-reflection is so important. It's so important for learning and development, for the cycle of kind of learning and continuous improvement. So things like sitting down and actively and consciously reflecting, and that's kind of the main point really, is that we all do reflect. If you're driving home in the car and you're thinking about a conversation that you've had that didn't go so well and what you do differently next time, that's reflection. But that's that kind of reactive reflection that we do, and usually we use it to beat ourselves up. What we really need to be doing it is to consciously sit down and, as Sarah said, think about what you've done during the week, reflect back on a particular case that you might have dealt with, or a tricky situation that you've been dealing with. What did you do well? What could you do better next time? How can you improve the outcomes for people, for yourself, for the organisation, for your residents next time you do that? So to consciously reflect, I think, is my biggest tip for people who are working in the housing sector. It's part of continuous development anyway, but it's also quite cathartic for yourself, I think, to sit down and realise how far you've come, how well you dealt with something. It's not just about beating yourself up over something that you should have done differently. It's about recognising what went well, what was better from the last time you were in that situation, and what you could do even better the next time you might be in that situation. And I'm sure we all know from working in housing, it's such a reactive role. No 2 days are ever the same. No two situations or cases are ever the same. So you might not even ever be in that situation again, but you can take that applied learning and take it somewhere else. I think another key thing for me is that any learning that you undertake needs to be meaningful and it needs to be intentional. So I'm sure we're all guilty of this. I certainly am guilty of this, of being given a 5-minute update training course that I've got to do, that's going to take me between 5 minutes and 30 minutes. And I've gone, yes, some CPD, I've got a tick box done there. I've done a bit of learning for the month, but actually it's not really on something that means anything to my role. It's on, yeah, obviously cybersecurity is very important, safeguarding is very important. All of those things that we do regularly are great, but it's important that we learn from those things as well, that we're not just using that as a tick box exercise, that it's intentional and it's meaningful in the way that we do it. So things like, if you are working in a sector, in an organisation, if you're working in the finance department, for example, and you've never really found out what happens in the allocation side of things, go and arrange to shadow there. That's CPD, that's learning, that's meaningful learning. It's giving you that round holistic view of what your organisation does. Spend some time with a voluntary organisation that might be supporting your tenants, with budgeting and food banks and things like that. Listening to podcasts, reading articles. Yes, go to those training courses as well, but recognise as well that the things that you do on a day-to-day basis that are new to you, they're all learning opportunities as well. And make sure that you are consciously logging those things.
Very good. Connor, what would you recommend people do?
It's along the same lines as Lindsay, really, but treat professional development as something that's ongoing and not a one-off. And that means being intentional, not just attending learning and training, but actually reflecting on the training and applying it in practice. And that reflection time is really key. because it creates that space to celebrate successes, learn from mistakes, and identify areas for improvement. And everyone works differently as well. There's no single perfect approach to CPD. The important thing is finding a system that works for you and sticking with it consistently. Professional development isn't about ticking a box. The sector will keep evolving, but the key is to make sure that our learning evolves with it.
Great. And the themes of reflection and I would maybe add curiosity as well, really coming through very strongly. Sarah, what would your recommendations be?
Yes, curiosity was going to be my recommendation. Great minds think alike, Chloe. Thank you. Yeah, so yes, I think that's the important thing now, and that sort of summarises what Lindsay and Connie you've both said, is being interested in what's going on around you. So then there's so many different varieties of roles in the housing sector. Everybody's doing different things all the time. So, it's thinking, what is this about? What do I need? It'd be good to understand a little bit more about what this means, how this relates to my role. What's my organisation doing at the moment? What are the broader areas there? And then what's the sector doing? What's the direction of travel? What's impacting at the moment, what's important. And I think that's what we always say about things like attending our events and whatever, give you that broader sector perspective to help understand how your role sits within your organisation and within the sector more broadly. So yes, always be curious and always explore why things are happening and what's being done in particular ways for what reason.
Yeah, because we don't all stay in those areas we started off in within housing. And I was saying earlier, I started off in housing management, and I've clearly moved into the policy space here at CIH. And actually, I know many colleagues who have moved around, and as you say, do very different roles. So actually, keeping your eyes open and your ears open to what is going on, what the new areas might be within housing, you might suddenly realise you've got a passion for a new developing area within social housing that didn't really exist 10 years ago, for example. So, yeah, really good. Lindsay.
So we've talked a lot about how to support individuals and what we recommend for individuals undertaking CPD. But I'd also like to sort of say what I'd like to see employers or organisations doing when it comes to training and qualifications, and that is to be very positive and upbeat about the changes, and to look into and find out about the barriers that staff might have to learning, and to try and remove or mitigate them as much as possible, particularly when it is formal training, formal qualifications. Some of the most common things I hear from learners who are undertaking CIH qualifications are things like a lack of confidence in their own abilities, their time constraints. They might have had bad experiences at school, or it's been a long time since they've done any formal qualification or structured learning. They might have learning support needs. They might not know they've got the resources available to them. So I think that by employers recognizing those, finding out those barriers and doing what they can sort of mitigate those barriers as much as possible, it's going to help to encourage much more people to be much more excited about getting into that training. There is an excitement there when people first start their qualifications. There's a feeling of value that they get from the qualification as they're being invested in by doing the qualification. Their employer is investing in them, and I think if we can remove or support the overcoming of those barriers, then learning will happen much easier. And the easier it is for people to learn, the better it is for everyone, the better outcomes we're going to get for everyone involved.
Absolutely. And I think it could absolutely help with recruitment, because one of our former presidents had a presidential campaign called Choose Housing, didn't they, Sarah? And we absolutely would advise and encourage employers to really take on the learning culture as one of those reasons to choose housing and to stay with us in the sector.
Yeah, so I think obviously from all the things we've been talking about today, there's a lot to consider, a lot to think about as an individual, and also for organisations and employers to think about as well. The competence and conduct standard is on track, as far as we know, to start in October 2026. So that will be the time when everybody needs to be signed up for their qualifications, and also when the regulator will start to be looking for the workforce development policy and the code of conduct that we mentioned earlier. There's lots of resources, as we've talked about, on the CIH website and to CIH members, around supporting in the implementation and demonstrating evidence towards that. So we would encourage you to look at that and think about CIH membership if you're not already, because we're there to help as your professional body. And yeah, it's, as I say, it's not a one size fits all by any means. So there's lots of different variety of things to access, and conversations that we can have with individuals and employers to help and support as much as possible.
Thanks ever so much, Sarah. And yes, it's, as we've all been saying, it's a really busy time for everyone in housing at the moment. But in this Learning at Work week, it would be really good to find that time and to prioritise that reflection and that commitment to continuous professional development that we've all been talking about. So thank you to all my guests today for the podcast, and thank you at home or work for listening. Tune into our next podcast on our website or the YouTube channel. Thank you ever so much. Goodbye.